So the 2022 campaign has come to an end, and it is now time to go over everything that happened in the season, go over how our Reds players did, take a look at the standings around the league leaders, all that good stuff, and everything we need to take a look at before we head into the offseason. So first things first, the standings. Starting with the National League East, you have the Mets coming out top in that division, with the Braves only a half game back behind them. Phillies were actually close as well, only 3 games out of first place. In the National League Central, you had the Brewers winning 95 games, and the division. Cardinals get second, obviously, because the only other 3 teams in the division are all just incredibly bad. You had the Cubs in third, us in fourth, and then the Pirates in dead last. On the National League West side of things, you had the Dodgers, who finished well above the Giants for first place. And if we take a look at the wild card, you had St. Louis and Atlanta were the wild card teams, while the Giants actually missed out by only 1 game, and the Phillies only 2.5 games out. So it was a close wild card race down to the wire, but St. Louis and Atlanta do edge it out to get those 2 spots. Now taking a look at the American League side of things, in the East, you've got the 98-win Yankees in first place, followed by the Red Sox and Blue Jays behind them. The Rays seem to just fall off a cliff in the second half of the season as they finish below 500. In the Central, the Guardians barely edge out the White Sox, and then even the Twins were only 3 games out too. Even the Royals had a chance. I believe they were 5 games out and below 500. Very tight AL Central division. And then in the West, you've got the Angels, who do hold on to win that division, while the Astros did have a great second half because they were below 500 and really not even in it at the All-Star break. But they did have a great second half, but they do come up short. If you take a look at the wild card for the American League, both Boston and Toronto, so 3 American League East teams are making the playoffs, but the Astros, with their big second half run, miss out by 2 games. Sucks to suck. So if you take a look at the postseason bracket in front of you, that's what it looks like before nothing happens. We will check back in with the results of the postseason a little bit later in the episode. But first, we're going to jump into the Reds stats. So the Bats are the first ones up. Jonathan India, with an OPS just barely under 800, but still a solid season. 34 home runs, led the team. Just would like to see a higher OBP from him. Obviously, a 309 OBP is not ideal, but still a very solid season from the second-year pro in Jonathan India, or the second-year big leaguer, I should say. Obviously, you're a pro in the minor leagues as well, but on to Joey Votto, who also finished with an OPS just below 800, 21 home runs for him. He had a pretty bad start to the season, so good to see he rebounded quite well and put up some decent numbers. Next year, he's probably only going to be hitting against right-handed pitching because he really can't hit against lefties anymore. So he's going to be a platoon guy next year, if I had to guess. And then we take a look at Aristides Aquino, who probably, unfortunately, not the long-term right fielder. Only a 718 OPS. He did hit 21 home runs, but I mean, we just don't need a guy who only hits home runs. Like, if you just have a guy whose only skill is running into like 20 plus home runs every year, but he doesn't really do anything else and he doesn't do anything consistently, it's kind of hard to justify having that guy in the lineup. Obviously, he has his arm out in right field, which does provide some value, but not really enough, because it's not like he's a gold glove level fielder with that arm. He's just kind of like a, all-power sort of guy. He does have 1 more year in his deal, so we'll see what happens after next season and what we do with him. Then there was Taylor Walls, who just did not have a great year at the dish. We acquired him at the deadline from the Tampa Bay Rays in the Tyler Naquin trade. Exactly 600 OPS and 343 at-bats. His contact rating is not the best. Hoping his numbers do get better as his career progresses, though, and that, all it really takes is having 1 really semi-breakout season, and that contact number could shoot up really well, and all of a sudden he's a really solid player. But then he also has that very high play discipline that is also going to play a part in helping him become a better hitter, because you have a discipline that high, and it's obviously going to play into account of how you perform at the plate. But also he does play an elite defensive position in shortstop, and that is why we acquired him, or one of the main reasons why we acquired him is that he is a very, very good defensive player, and obviously that is still going to be the case even if he doesn't learn how to hit. Then you also got Nolan Jones, who put up solid numbers, a 778 OPS and 333 ABs. Whether he ends up as the third baseman, the left fielder, or the DH, he's definitely a part of the long-term plan, obviously. Then we got Tyler Stevenson, who, not the year I would have wanted to see from him. I mean, remember, he is a guy who I want to eventually move to first base when Votto either retires or, hopefully retires. So he's a guy who I want to move to first base and then get a more defensive-oriented catcher at the catcher spot. But I mean, I can't really justify moving a guy like him to first base if he's only going to have a 714 OPS. I mean, not the worst average OBP combo, but it just has no pop and it's bad at all this year for whatever reason. He did spend quite a bit of time on the IL, so that could play into it a bit, but hopefully in Season 2 he starts to turn things around with the OPS number and really show that he could be a first baseman. While Jake Fraley didn't really perform how I would have liked to see, I was hoping he would just be like an absolute OBP god, like a Daniel Nava type player, but unfortunately he is not. And unlike Taylor Walls, he is not a Gold Glove level defender at his position, so he's kind of really just a one-trick pony, and he's not even really performing with that one trick. Then there was Jose Barrero, who was not good at all at the plate in 248 at-bats in the big leagues. Not giving up on him just yet, though. He is still very young with a B potential, so he still has room to improve. And his hitting and his contact and power ratings are good enough to where if he just has like one half-decent season, those things will shoot up, and all of a sudden Jose Barrero looking like a legitimate guy. Mark Colesberry was actually quite a bit of a surprise for us this year. Went into the season as just some random guy in AAA that we had. Ended up playing himself into the backup catcher gig. Really solid 179 ABs for us this year. Stevenson was on the IL quite a bit more than we would have liked, but Colesberry did put up good numbers. Mid-700s OPS. I doubt he's a long-term option at like a starting catcher. Like, I doubt he's going to be the guy who starts every day at catcher if Stevenson does end up moving to first base. But I mean, at the very worst, he's a very solid number 3 or backup option in our organization. Then there was Albert Almora Jr., who, besides that one game he had against the Nationals where he had 2 home runs, he basically did nothing besides that, so he won't be back for Season 2. There's no point in bringing him back. Max Schrock was not great either. Didn't get too many ABs in the bigs, but he is worth keeping around, at least in AAA, as a depth potential. Plus, he has that B potential, so, anything can happen with a guy who has B potential. And then there was Delano DeShields, who also was not very good. We acquired him from the Braves, just kind of swapping him and Donovan Solano at the deadline, just to see if we could get some sort of magic from him, just to get, a guy who steals a lot of bags or has the potential to steal a lot of bags, to see if he could, perform and, be a kind of a sneaky good player for us. But I mean, in his time this year, nothing showed me that he's ever going to be anybody who we can rely on to play every day on this team. So he's probably not going to be back either. And then if we shift to the pitching side of things, we've got Hunter Green, who had an extremely solid rookie season. I honestly liked all of our starting pitching this season. It was all pretty solid. I had no problems with the starting pitching. It was more so our bullpen and just our hitting. We have some other issues with the team, but I don't think starting pitching was really that. Green's ERA and FIP was both in the 3s. His K rate wasn't as high as I would have liked to see, but only a 3.169 or a 3.16 walk per 9 is totally fine by me. I mean, when I pitch with him, he's way more wild in game than he is in the sim, so I've started to figure out a bit more how to use him though. So his last couple starts I've used him definitely a bit more efficient, but still, Hunter Green, a very solid rookie season for us. Then we got Tyler Mahle, who also very solid. Got a bit lucky with the FIP up at 4.69. Don't hate it, though. Like I said, we're trying to build an elite defense here, so guys who are going to have low ERAs and like FIPs that aren't awful but higher than their ERA, those guys are going to benefit from being in our defense once we do get those pieces in place. And then Lodolo is another guy like that. A very solid rookie season for him as well. 3.84 ERA, 4.40 FIP, very respectable. I like using him in-game quite a lot. He's just one of those soft contact guys. I'm just constantly peppering those corners with him, with the 2-seamer and the 4-seamer and his changeup. I mean, he is the type of pitcher I really like to use. And then there's Luis Castillo, who, broken record, but Also very solid for us. ERA and FIP in the threes. Nothing to complain about with him at all. Then we got Justin Dunn. A little bit more wild than the other guys, but still very effective. Had a 2.18 ERA in 99 innings, split between the bullpen and the rotation. And then we move into the full-time bullpen guys with Tony Santillan, who was just, a lot of the bullpen was kind of just guys who were just okay, or guys who were just bad, and he was just kind of okay. Not a lot special about him. I do like him, but probably nothing more than a depth guy in the organization. Lucas Sims had a good year in the pen as well. 72 strikeouts and 58 and a third innings pitched. ERA and FIP in the mid-threes. Give me a whole bunch of psychos in the pen like Lucas Sims and I'll be happy. Then we got Jeff Hoffman, who I doubt it continues next year, but he was actually really good in the bullpen for us this year. I do want to sign some relievers in the offseason, so he'll probably start the season in AAA, but he's definitely a guy who, he has the deep potential, but still, he's definitely a guy who played quite well for us this season. Then there was Steven Duggar, who did get a lot of innings in the late season as that long reliever guy. Was respectable, definitely worth keeping around, even if just for the stirrups and the glasses, honestly. Luis Cessa, though, absolutely awful. Just was absolutely awful for us. Will not be back in the organization. Nothing more to say about him. Ross Detweiler, he was not bad in 34 and a third innings pitched. The very veteran left-hander, but he is not nearly good enough to bring back at almost 40 years old. So Ross Detweiler also not going to be getting brought back for season 2. And now let's shift to taking a look at some of the league leaders around the league. Starting things off with the NL, we've got the batting average leader was Paul Goldschmidt of the St. Louis Cardinals. The hits leader, another NL Central guy, was Brian Reynolds with 181 hits. He also led the league with 42 doubles. And then the stolen base leader, another NL Central guy, in Jonathan Villar with 46 swiped bags for the Chicago Cubs. The home run leader was Ronald Acuna Jr. with 43 of them. He also had Tyler O'Neill and Hunter Renfroe right behind him, some more NL Central representatives. The OPS leader was Acuna with a 982, and then right behind him in second place was his teammate Matt Olson with a 972. The batter war leader was Ronald Acuna with a 716 war, and then right behind him was Brian Reynolds with a 713. The saves leader was Giovanni Gallegos, who had 54, and then he also had Lucas Sims, who was very respectably in the top 5 with 42 saves. The ERA leader was Brandon Woodruff of the Milwaukee Brewers with a 2.09 ERA, and then Steven Strasburg still finished with a very, very solid 2.15 ERA. The innings leader was Brandon Woodruff with a 2.362 innings pitched. The strikeouts leader was Jacob deGrom with a 252 strikeouts, and then he was also the leader in WAR among pitchers with a 6.8 WAR. Now we move things on to the American League side of things. The batting leader was Mike Trout with a 345 batting average. Absolutely absurd season for him. The hits leader was a tie between Corey Seager and Mike Trout. Both of them had 179. He also had a lot of surprise names on there. You had guys like Robbie Grossman up in the top 5. You had Miles Straw, who had a lot of hits, and then basically the entire Boston Red Sox lineup. The doubles leader was Mike Trout, but another one, Miles Straw, 41 doubles on the season. The stolen base leader was Cedric Mullins of the Orioles, who had 33, but right behind him with 32 was Tommy Pham. And if you look at his numbers, he basically just stopped hitting home runs and stealing bases once we traded him to the Guardians. So I don't know what that was about, but he just stopped. I thought he had a very, very good shot at a 30-30 season. He ended up hitting like one more home run than he did when we traded him. But speaking of home runs, the leader in the American League was Mike Trout with 43. The OBP leader, also Mike Trout with a 444 on-base percentage, the only guy in the American League in the 400s. The slugging percentage was at 707, which is once again just absolutely absurd. The second guy in the league was Judge with a 593 slugging percentage. He led the league in OPS as well, obviously, with a 1151 OPS. He also led in WAR. He had a 10.7 WAR, and the second place guy was Yasmani Grandal with a 7.2. Mike Trout, Jesus. The saves leader was Liam Hendricks of the Chicago White Sox. The ERA leader was Patrick Sandoval. He had another Angel on the league leaders. The innings leader was Kevin Gausman with 228 innings pitched. The strikeouts leader was Shane Bieber. And then the WAR leader, you had three guys. They were all within .1 of each other. Patrick Sandoval had 5.2. Kevin Gausman had 5.1. And Chris Sale had 5.0. Now we'll take a look at the award winners, starting things off, staying with the American League. The MVP, of course, Mike Trout of the LA Angels. The Cy Young, another Angel, in Patrick Sandoval gets the Cy Young. The reliever of the year was Adam Simber of the Toronto Blue Jays. The rookie of the year was Spencer Torkelson of the Detroit Tigers. The Gold Glove shortstop, another Angel, was David Fletcher. The Gold Glove left fielder, another Angel in Brandon Marsh. And then the Silver Slugger at DH was JD Martinez of the Boston Red Sox. But then there was also Mike Moustakas, who was third with 30 home runs with the Cleveland Guardians. The Silver Slugger catcher, once again, just continuing to have a dominant run at that award, is Salvador Perez of the Kansas City Royals. Now, if we shift over to the National League side of things, the MVP was Matt Olson of the Atlanta Braves. I have no clue how he got it over Acuna, because usually that award is like the home runs award, and Acuna had the higher home runs. He had more home runs, he had more OPS, he had the better WAR. I genuinely don't know how Olson... He maybe had more RBI. I didn't really even look at that, because I couldn't even tell you the last time I looked at an RBI number and was like, oh, that's interesting. And then another questionable one, the Cy Young does go to Corbin Burns. Questionable, and it definitely should have gone to probably Brandon Woodruff, because he was definitely the better pitcher overall on the Milwaukee Brewers. But they gave it to his teammate in Corbin Burns just simply because he won 21 games. That's really all it is. It's very easy to decide who gets the Cy Young in this game, because it's just basically whoever wins the most games. Because MLB The Show is basically made by a bunch of 95-year-old sports writers. While the reliever of the year was Taylor Rogers of the San Diego Padres, Tyler Rogers was among the finalists as well. The rookie of the year was O'Neal Cruz of the Pirates. I have no clue how Hunter Green was not even in the top 3 on this list. They just had 3 bats on there who had solid rookie seasons, but you're going to tell me that Hunter Green couldn't even get in the top 3? That's pretty wild to me. But then you also had the Gold Glove second baseman was Tommy Edman of the St. Louis Cardinals. They just continue to win every Gold Glove at second base. The Gold Glove third baseman was actually Arenado being dethroned by Joey Wendell of the Miami Marlins. And then in center field, it was somehow Odubel Herrera of the Phillies. Don't ask me how. He's not a good defender. I have no clue how he won the Gold Glove. The Silver Slugger at second base was Ketel Marte of the Arizona Diamondbacks, but then in second place behind him was actually Jonathan India. So very solid season for our own Jonathan India. And then just a little bit of an update on the former Reds that we traded away. Tyler Naquin finished the year with a 7.72 OPS and 12 home runs with Tampa Bay. Hunter Strickland had a 2.11 ERA and 38 and third innings pitched with the St. Louis Cardinals, a 4.70 K per 9, just hilarious. Justin Wilson had a solid 3.22 ERA and 36 and a third with St. Louis. And then you had Mike Minor, who had a 4.41 ERA and 145 innings pitched with the Chicago White Sox. So now it's time to take a look at what actually happened in the postseason, and the Dodgers, of course, the MLB The Show gods, the Los Angeles Dodgers win the 2022 World Series. The Guardians won the American League, and they lost the World Series in 5 games. Angels absolutely loaded this year. They had Mike Trout with his insane season, obviously Ohtani. They had all the Gold Gloves. They just had a stacked lineup from top to bottom. They had great pitching. They had the Cy Young Award winner. Lose in the first round. They lose to the Guardians, who go all the way to the they go all the way to the World Series, obviously. Atlanta actually gave the Dodgers a tough series in the LDS, but obviously they ended up losing to the Dodgers, while the AL postseason MVP was Josh Naylor of the Cleveland Guardians, and the NL postseason MVP was Cody Bellinger of the Dodgers, while the World Series MVP was Gavin Lux. And now we are jumping into the off-season portion, but first we're obviously taking a look at who retired here, is that just going to scroll by the screen pretty quickly. Really not too many notable names on there. Really the only notable one was like Adam Wainwright. I believe that Yachty did not retire, Pujols did not retire. There was a couple names on there that you would have expected would have retired that didn't retire, but I mean, not too many big names on there. And then also no Hall of Fame inductees. I think I said this a bunch of times already in these series. I'm pretty sure they just haven't updated who they think would be Hall of Famers, because they made these games however many years ago, and they just had this like list of guys who were going to be Hall of Famers. It was like, oh, Jeter's going to be a Hall of Famer, David Ortiz is, Pujols is. All these guys are like surefire Hall of Famers, but they just haven't updated that list in like forever. So I'm pretty sure like if Verlander retired, he wouldn't even make the Hall of Fame. Like nobody's going to make the Hall of Fame in this game, just nobody. But like I said, it is time to jump into the offseason. Now, the first thing we are going to do is take a look at our staff. Now, we've got David Bell and pitching coach Derek Johnson, who will return. There's no point in firing a manager of a team who's just going to be bad again this season and also still has 3 years left on his deal. So we're not going to fire David Bell. And then also Derek Johnson. Like I said, I thought our pitching was pretty solid, so I'm not going to fire Derek Johnson as the pitching coach. We did fire the farm director, though, and then the new guys in those places are the hitting coach is Charlie Berry, the first base coach is Bobby Snyder, the third base coach is Greg Cordero, and then the new farm director is Lawrence Taylor. So now if we take a look at our budget, this is what our budget looks like heading into the re-sign phase, into the actual acquiring players and bringing players back phase. Not counting arbitration guys, Votto and Aquino are the only players signed to a contract, aside from the 2022 draft picks who were just already signed at the deadline when we drafted them last year. But I mean, we have plenty of room to go around spending. So the first things first, the guys who we let walk. Notable names: Ross Detweiler, Delino DeShields Jr., Luis Sessa, Kyle Farmer, Albert Almora Jr. Obviously, there's a bunch of random D potential minor leaguers that we let go as well, guys like Sandy Leone and Connor Overton, and just random D potential guys who are never going to do anything and are just wasting space in our organization. But I'm not going to go through and list and name every single one of these guys, because this video would be 6 weeks long if I did that. Now into the re-sign phase. Once again, I will not be going over every single player we re-signed. I'm not going to be like, oh, we signed this C potential guy to a $70K deal in the minor leagues. If a guy is in the organization and he's not like a 29-year-old D potential guy, just assume that he's back. But as far as the guys who I do want to highlight, we are bringing back Jake Bauers. We're bringing him back on a $670K deal for 1 year just to be a depth option in AAA for us at first base and corner outfield. Zach Godley, also bringing him back at $700K for a year. Like him as starting pitching depth in the organization as well as a possible bullpen option. Jeff Hoffman, obviously, we're bringing him back at $700K for a year. He performed well enough in the big leagues that I just had to bring him back. And ideally, like I said, we do sign some relievers in free agency, so Hoffman will be in AAA to start the year, but he is always an option to end up back in the big leagues. Tony Santillan, we signed to a 2-year deal at $1.2 million total, so that's basically like $500K per year. Just a depth reliever to have in the organization. Taylor Walls signed to a similar deal, $1.3 million over 2 years. Still need to see more before I commit to him long term, but we're just basically buying out 2 years of team control. Jose Barrero, basically the same thing as Taylor Walls, just buying out a couple years of team control. Justin Dunn, however, $6.6 million over 3 years for him, the Boston College guy. We're just buying out his arbitration years. He has 3 more years left of arbitration. We're just buying those out. He has around $2 million per year. That's a steal if he's going to be a solid pitcher for us. Even if he's a mediocre pitcher, that's still a very solid deal for him. Hunter Green, 4 years, $5.4 million. Very, very cheap 4-year deal. Not totally buying out his arbitration years, but we are locking him up at $1.4 million per before he even has a breakout season and just suddenly wants a ton more money. So basically what happens is, let's just say of year 2 of this deal, he has an insane breakout season and he's like one of the best pitchers in the big leagues. All of a sudden he's going to start wanting like some big money in arbitration. We're going to have him locked up at $1.4 million. Kind of did the same thing with Nick Lodolo, just only for 3 years for like $500,000. Then we've also got Tyler Stevenson, who we signed to a 3-year, $5.8 million deal. He is signed through his age 29 season now. Nolan Jones signed to a 5-year, $3.6 million deal. Same idea as Green, just buying out a bunch of his team control at a really, really cheap $720K per. And then those are just all of his arbitration years except for one. So once that contract's up, he'll have his final year of arbitration left. We also offered Lucas Sims a deal that was basically like what he was asking for in arbitration, except for 2 years. He ended up declining that because I guess he wanted more out of a contract, and he ended up just taking what we were giving him, except for 1 year through arbitration. And then the biggest re-sign of the offseason, Jonathan India at $25.8 million over 5 years. That's about $5.2 million per through his age 31 season. Already cheap for what he is now as a player. If he gets even better, it's an absolute steal. He did get a plus 11 to his power versus right-handed pitching this year, but he also did have a minus 8 to his contact versus left-handed pitching. So a little bit of a double-edged sword there, but still very good to see because he was cracking a lot of home runs for us. He had 34. But now is where the real fun stuff happens. We are on to free agency. Obviously, we are not trying to win the World Series still. We are not a team that's here trying to compete and go out and get the best free agents and get these guys to like 9-year, multi-million-dollar deals. That's probably something we'll never end up doing, but I mean, definitely not right now. But we do want to start getting guys that fit our vision. This great defense, speedy players all over the lineup, sort of vision for what our team will look like. So essentially, we're just going to go out and get a bunch of stopgaps. Guys who can play in the big leagues, guys who are not going to block any of our top prospects from getting playing time, and if those guys end up being Major League ready, they're not going to be blocking them at the Major League level. We can either just bench one of those guys or DFA them or whatever it may be to make room for one of our guys to be called up. And then also, if one of these guys who we signed to a short-term deal does perform in the season, if they have like a great first half, we can just dump them at the deadline for prospects. So the first guy we went out and signed was Kevin Kiermaier to a $16.4 million contract over 2 years. We've got our Harrison Bader in center field. He is an insane defensive center fielder, 99 fielding, 99 reaction, 88 arm strength, 98 arm accuracy. Just incredible. He's got the fleet feet too with 87 speed. Obviously not a great hitter, but I mean, that's not what he's getting paid to do. That's not why he's in the big leagues. If he's an okay hitter, we will absolutely take that. We got him for 2 years because the idea is that in season 3, we could have our young guys developed at that point to a point where we could be kind of a sneaky good team in season 3. So he'll be around for that year, and he'll be our everyday center fielder, just patrolling out there, making plays, and hopefully being an okay bat for us as well at the bottom of the order. And who knows, if season 4, if he's still performing really well in season 3, and I want to bring him back in season 4 on like a 1 or 2 more year deal, we could do that. Obviously, that's looking very far ahead in the future, and a lot of things can change in that amount of time, but that is an option we have with Kiermaier. Then we also went out and got another defense-first player in Austin Barnes. $9 million over 2 years for him. Another defensive gem of a player. Absolutely incredible pitch framer in real life. Obviously, that's not a thing in the show. I'll have no idea how they would even implement that to be a thing into MLB The Show, without it being like a super gimmicky, cheesy thing. But still, he is insane defensively. 91 fielding, 97 reaction, 81 block rating. Not a great bat, but that is to be expected with a big league catcher nowadays. 77 plate discipline, though, could make up for that. And he also still has respectable contact power ratings versus left-handed pitching. So the plan for him is that in 2023, this upcoming season, he is going to be Tyler Stevenson's backup at the catcher position. And then in season 3, he ideally takes over at catcher when Votto retires and Stevenson moves to first base. Then depending how things go in that season, in 2024, we can decide what we do from there. Obviously, like I said, things can change. We can maybe sign somebody. Maybe we have a catcher in the organization we draft by then. Who knows what happens? But it's all about flexibility. We're not trying to lock ourselves into a position being guaranteed for many, many years here. We want to keep the situation fluid at pretty much every position at this team. Then the next guy we went out and got was Jonathan VR at $4 million over 1 year. He was 2022's National League stolen base leader, coming to a team that wants to run like the 1980s Cardinals. So definitely a pretty good fit if he can perform like that for us. Not sure if he ends up being a bench guy for us, an everyday player, but definitely a potential guy that we could trade at the deadline on that 1-year deal, or just a guy who maybe helps us be competitive. Who knows what happens, but Jonathan VR is now going to be a Cincinnati Red. We also, like I mentioned, wanted to go ahead and upgrade our bullpen a bit, so the first guy we saw was Brad Hand. Wanted to get a good left-hander in there. Gave him a $5 million deal for 1 year. He picked returning to Philly for less money instead. Then we tried to give Dellin Betances a deal, tried giving him a 1-year deal. He opted to go elsewhere. He signs with the Boston Red Sox. Trevor Rosenthal, same thing. Give him a 1-year deal. He picks the Atlanta Braves. But then we ended up getting a couple guys who I do really like. Will Smith, $1.3 million for 1 year, former Braves and Giants closer, very solid left-handed pitcher to have in the bullpen. We also got Anthony Bass, $2.8 million for 1 year, veteran right-handed pitching, steady, consistent reliever. What we need, not a strikeout guy, but very good at limiting hits and throws hard. We also got Dylan Maples at the league minimum, $570K for 1 year. Depth signing, very much so, but he's a hard thrower, wipeout breaking stuff, a little wild, but the rest of his ratings look so good that we just basically had to get him and see how he is in our organization. We also went out and got Josh James at $1.2 million for 1 year. Currently a starter, but we are going to move him full-time to the bullpen. He is a hard-throwing right-handed pitcher with a K per 9 that's quite high and a very high pitching clutch rating as well. Could be a nasty option in the bullpen for us. Now a few more speed guys we brought onto the team. The first one we saw was Jorge Mateo at $1.4 million for 1 year. He was, like I said, the first of the guys that we saw that were just way too perfect to bring on, to pass up. I mean, these guys fit our plans to a T. 27-year-old former top prospect. He was actually in the Sonny Gray to Oakland, or Sonny Gray from Oakland to the Yankees trade. He was one of the Yankees prospects who went to Oakland in that deal. He can play all over the field, second, third, short, left, center, right, everywhere except for first and catcher. And he's one of the fastest guys in all of baseball with 98 speed and 79 steal rating. Hasn't quite figured out the bat yet, but he has hitting ratings that aren't the worst. They're very similar to like what Jose Barrero's are, so where if he just has like one good season, bam, he's all of a sudden a legitimate player. And then we also got a couple of veteran speed guys in John Birdie at $940K for 1 year. Another speed demon, one of the top stolen base guys in the National League with the Marlins in 2022. 96 speed, 95 steal, can play all over the place just like Mateo. 75 plate discipline, decent pop against left-handed pitching, decent contact against right-handed pitching. He's another guy to have in our system. Whit Merrifield, $3.7 million for 1 year. Has stolen 40 bags a couple times in his career. Super high vision guy with an 82 vision. Great defender at multiple positions. Only 77 speed, which is still quite good, but he does have a 99 steal rating. Definitely very similar to what Tommy Pham's ratings were, with the speed and steal, that is. Now, obviously, him and John Birdie are not long-term guys to have in the organization, but we got to establish the culture. We got to get our vision in place here. Start getting, used to having guys like this on our team and seeing how we can form the lineup and how we can perform in games and getting the strategy down. We also wanted to go out and get another solid starter to add to our rotation, and we went and saw James Paxton was still out there. So if we have to move Dunn to the bullpen again, I do not mind that at all. He was very solid in the bullpen, so we got James Paxton on a 1-year deal for $13.5 million, coming off a respectable season in Boston, healthy the whole year, started 33 games. If he's great, we could get some solid prospects for him at the deadline. If he's decent, we could get some decent prospects for him at the deadline. If we're somehow having a competitive season, that's cool too. And then last but certainly not least of the acquisitions we made in free agency, JD Martinez. I did not go into free agency with the plan of getting a middle-of-the-order bat. Definitely not a guy who fits our plan of having, speed guys all around the lineup. He is very much slow. But he was just sitting there with 0 offers, quite deep into free agency. Nobody was offering him anything. So I just figured, hey, let's just give this guy a $16 million deal for 2 years. He just won the AL Silver Slugger at DH. I mean, he is just a professional hitter through and through. The guy can hit in the 3-4-5 hole for us for the next 2 seasons. Steady presence in the lineup. Like I said, establish the culture, mentor the young guys. Obviously not a speed threat like we want, but we do need to have at least a little pop in the lineup. And right now we basically have Votto and nobody else, or Votto and India and nobody else providing pop. So JD Martinez for the next 2 years, just going to be a steady guy to have in, like I said, either the 3, 4, or 5 hole for us. And now taking a look at the Rule 5 draft, we actually added Jake Bowers and Brandon Williamson to our 40-man roster just to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. Ethan Small was just sitting there in the Rule 5 draft, and he was too good for me to pass up. A B potential left-handed pitcher. I remember seeing him at college at Mississippi State. Very solid left-handed guy to have in the organization. He will be in the pen to start for us this year. He could move to the rotation once we potentially open up 3 spots at the deadline if we end up trading Castillo, Malley, and Paxton. But the worst-case scenario with Ethan Small is that he's bad and we send him back to Milwaukee. The best-case scenario is that we steal a B potential possible starter pitcher or multi-inning reliever from a division foe. Now if we take a look around the league at what the other teams did in free agency, some of the ones that popped up that I noticed, we had Joe Musgrove. The first one that really popped up at all was Joe Musgrove to the LA Dodgers. Then you had Aaron Judge going to the Chicago White Sox. In real life, I think he's going to be an Angel. I think he is too perfect of a player to end up on the Angels. He's going to be like 30 years old when he hits free agency. They're going to give him a monster deal, and he's going to be not as good as he was in New York, but he's going to be on the Angels. He is the perfect Angel player. He's from the area. Perfect. He's going to end up on the Los Angeles Angels in real life. That's been my theory now for months. I'm sticking with it. But in this universe, he ends up on the Chicago White Sox. Aaron Nola also goes to the Texas Rangers. They finally get a legit starter to have in their rotation. And then Luis Severino goes to the Colorado Rockies. An absolutely crazy team to sign with as a starting pitcher, but he goes there after having a great year last year with New York. And then just a hilarious signing. Clayton Kershaw does not go to the Texas Rangers or go back to the Dodgers. He goes to the San Francisco Giants, the Dodgers' arch rivals. And the Giants improve their rotation once more by adding Jameson Taillon to their team as well. Mike Clevenger goes to the Seattle Mariners. Noah Syndergaard goes to the San Diego Padres. Liam Hendricks was actually traded to the Kansas City Royals in division. Edwin Diaz goes to that division as well in the free agency, signs with the Tigers. Seth Lugo, another big-time reliever, goes to the Toronto Blue Jays. He joins last year's Reliever of the Year award winner in Adam Simber. Taylor Rogers, last year's NL Reliever of the Year award winner with the Padres, goes to the St. Louis Cardinals, who made a huge splash in free agency. They are legit a scary team now in the NL Central and all of baseball, and they just happen to, of course, be in our division. They also add Trey Turner, which is just, basically the only weak spot in their lineup was shortstop with Trey Turner, and now with shortstop with Edmundo Sosa, and now they've got Trey Turner at that spot. And then they added a couple more pitchers, and Blake Trinan is now a member of their bullpen as well, and they added Sean Manaea to their starting rotation. Boston added a couple of guys, and Michael Brantley, probably their DH replacement for JD Martinez. Sonny Gray is also being added to their rotation. Joey Gallo is staying in the AL East, going to the Tampa Bay Rays. And then Josh Bell is going to the Houston Astros to play first base for them. And Tim Anderson is going to the National League to play for the Philadelphia Phillies. So as far as the state of the 2023 Season 2 Reds, I highly doubt that we are a good team, but we could be kind of competitive. If a bunch of things go well, if guys like Whit Merrifield have just insane seasons for us, things could go well enough to where we have a competitive year, where we wouldn't, we wouldn't be buying at the deadline, but we also might be hesitant to trade away everybody. But the plan is obviously not for that to happen. The plan is for these guys to have decent enough seasons where we dump them at the deadline, get more prospects in the organization. We'll just have to see what happens here in Season 2. But first thing, we are going to be going over what the new look Reds look like. So in the rotation, 1 to 5, it is Luis Castillo, Tyler Mahle, James Paxton, Hunter Green, and Nick Lodolo. While in the bullpen, we've got Lucas Sims, TJ Antone, who's back from his elbow surgery last year, Will Smith, the lefty, Justin Dunn's in the bullpen, Tony Santillan, Anthony Bass, and Ethan Small. Now if we take a look at the lineup versus right-handed pitching, it's Jonathan Villar playing right field. I mean, he doesn't have right field on his positions right now, but I mean, he can play center field. So I figured he can play center field, he can play right field. So we made that his primary position, and then the rest of them just moved to the secondary position. And then after him in the lineup, it is Jonathan India at second base, JD Martinez DHing, Joey Votto at first, Nolan Jones in left, Tyler Stevenson catching, Jose Barrero third base, Kevin Kiermaier center, Taylor Walls shortstop. And then against lefties, it is Jonathan Villar leading things off and playing first base, India second, Stevenson in the 3-hole catching, Martinez DHing in the cleanup spot, Nolan Jones in left field, Whit Merrifield in right field, Jose Barrero at third, Kevin Kiermaier in center, and Taylor Walls rounding things out at shortstop. We also made quite a few number changes to guys. First one being Nolan Jones is now going to be wearing 17 for us at the big league level. He wore 10 as far as I could tell when he was playing growing up in the Philly area. He wore 10 in baseball and hockey. Unfortunately, that number is retired in Cincinnati, but I did notice that he wore 17 in Akron with the Rubber Ducks when he was with the Cleveland Guardians organization, so we're going to be having him wear number 17 here in Cincinnati. Kevin Kiermaier obviously can't wear 39 because that is Lucas Sims' number, so he is wearing 33. Jonathan Villar is wearing 22 for us. Austin Barnes is wearing 12 because I believe he usually wears 15, and I think that's Senzel's number, and I'm not going to make Senzel change his number, even though he's not in the big leagues right now. Austin Barnes is just going to move to being number 12. Whit Merrifield is wearing number 4. John Birdie is wearing number 7. And Ethan Small, the Rule 5 draft pick, is wearing number 74. So that'll pretty much wrap things up here for the end of season and off-season video. The next episode you will be seeing is the opening day plus 2 other games episode, but the opening day game will be against the San Francisco Giants at Great American Ballpark, Luis Castillo on the hill for us, and Carlos Rodon on the bump for the Giants. So with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of the Cincinnati Reds franchise here at MLB The Show 22. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I am saying, get Texas Motor Speedway off the schedule.